This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
Talking about just the brain is not enough when talking about trauma. Every person on the planet has experienced some form of trauma, whether that be the little t traumas or big T traumas. After gathering historical pieces from her clients, Ashley Fredericks began to ask questions about family and relational dynamics, as well as any adversarial life experiences along the way. They talk about triggers, core beliefs about self and others, and also the ways in which to access connection to the inner child. The practice of yoga in Ashley's own life has been highly beneficial, which is what prompted her to specialize in trauma healing married with yoga. Valeria interviews Ashley Fredericks. She is a licensed social worker working on her clinical licensure at Rerooted Counseling based in Denver, Colorado. Ashley has her master's in social work from Denver University. Her background in teaching trauma-informed yoga is helpful in the work that she provides as a therapist. Ashley has a background working with a variety of populations, including the juvenile justice system, community mental health, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, victims of interpersonal violence, and trauma survivors. Ashley's specialty as a therapist is in anxiety, depression, and trauma. Meet Ashley at integrated-experiences.com and Instagram at integrated.experiences. Here is the interview with Ashley Fredericks.
In your own words, who is Ashley Fredericks?
Oh, wow. So I've gotten this question so many times throughout my career in social settings, asking myself even these questions. And I feel like every time I get this question, I get this kind of pit in my stomach, like, who am I? And I think, it's hard, to feel like there's a concrete answer, because I think that it sometimes can feel much more complicated than that. But since, I've gone through many versions of myself throughout many phases of my life, the more that I learn, the more that I listen to myself and others and understand even more about myself. And so, the hats that I wear by training, I'm a trauma-informed yoga instructor. I'm a trauma therapist, social worker. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, partner, friend, teacher, a student. And kind of underneath that, a human who has complex emotions, who makes mistakes, who feels deeply, is compassionate, a listener, open to new ideas. But I think even kind of greater than that, the things that set my soul on fire is having meaningful connections, learning and being inspired and going on adventures with my pups and my partner, and, quiet moments and nature and movement. I mean, those are some things that really, really kind of light my spirit up.
One of my final questions to all my guests, pretty much, is about experiences that you wish everyone to have before they die. And I hear over and over and over and over again the answer of love. Loving someone and being loved by them. That deep connection, human connection, it's so important.
And it's such a big piece. I mean, especially when it comes to connection and the work that I do with trauma healing. is all about connection. It's like we need to, we're made for human connection, and we need that connection to feel close and to feel bonded and to feel really safe in our environments. But first, it relates to that connection that we have to ourselves as well.
Not to mention that the connection with animals is just incredibly beautiful too.
Yes.
Boy,
yes.
I have a dog, and I feel that it's easier to just be myself completely with him than with my husband. Isn't that funny?
Yes, exactly. And they're there, and they don't, talk back, and you don't have to show up in a certain way. They just love you, and it's like, it's all good. It's okay.
Yeah, right. Is that because of unconditional love, Ashley, that we feel in the presence of animals?
Absolutely.
It is.
I absolutely feel that.
And sometimes I wonder if we can find that with humans too. I know some of us can and have done, and it is engaging in this moment with unconditional love. But it's a challenge, isn't it?
It is a challenge. And I think that it relates to the work that I do in trauma healing too. It's how do we, and I talk a lot with my clients about, what is the historical pieces of, the way that you have attached to a caregiver? What are some maybe implications as a child, the way that you grew up, the way that you experience the world, and the narratives that come out from that experience. And when it comes to those, and I talk a lot with clients about, attachment and attachment wounds and all of these things. It can be really hard when you have these narratives around, is one of my caregivers going to show up for me, or do I have to rely on myself? Do I need to kind of develop these protective mechanisms or defense mechanisms as a way to show up? And so, of course, the way that we see those narratives as children, and that the things that we learn there get translated into the way that we show up in any relationship moving forward.
It's so powerful how it works, the brain, the mind, and then the body, because we know that trauma changes the brain, right, Ashley?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we also know that the brain can change again, kind of wire itself again in a positive way. That's interesting. The question that I often ask to therapists and people like yourself is, do we actually get to the point of becoming trauma-free and completely healed from those initial imprints from childhood? Is that possible?
From just kind of my experience as a therapist, but kind of doing my own inner work and journey with that, I don't think that narratives completely go away. I think that there needs to be work along the way that kind of help with narratives. And of course, there's medications you could take and all of these other things that you can do related to, like PTSD and stuff like that. But, there's so many other ways and strategies to help with self-regulation, because really that's what that is. It's recognizing that there's these triggers that are happening in the way that I show up and the way that I'm interacting with others and interacting with myself and the stories that I'm telling myself. And so with some of that, being able to kind of regulate the nervous system is such a huge piece of that. And it takes a lot of kind of effort and training and practice to do that, because it doesn't just come, from 2 or 3 therapy sessions or, doing a couple breathing exercises here and there. But it really takes this kind of dedicated practice, through things like yoga and and movement and things like that.
Another question that came to me is, when it comes to regulating the nervous system as you speak, that for me has been very interesting to notice that there's no narratives anymore. I don't hear those stories in my head, but the body is still being triggered by the presence of some people, and I can't help it. I
Oh,
stay
no.
with it, the body, and I'm aware of it. But it's interesting because I've been through a lot of abuse, emotional abuse and physical abuse as a child. So that is interesting to watch, that it's the body doesn't let go. It has not yet. And that's why I asked the question, will it ever let go, the body? Because it was so powerful, the experiences, that it's still here. It's holding on to it in a more kind way these days. It's not as painful as it used to be.
Yeah. And it's really, so I do a lot of like, are you familiar with EMDR?
Yes.
What that stands for? Yeah. So, I do a lot of EMDR, and that's kind of what you're talking about, right? So it's getting from kind of that mind stuff, moving its way, into recognizing what's happening in my body, and also seeing that, what is showing up when I'm getting these triggers, and then being able to desensitize through that, so that no longer is it this feeling that's so triggering, unbearable, I can't manage this. And then it becomes just this, it's almost as if you can kind of see what's happening on a movie screen, and it's no longer this really, really intense. You might feel that, right? You might still feel that, anxiety. You might feel that kind of buzzing in the body, or you might feel, any of those sensations. And kind of earlier, when I was mentioning you that question of who am I was like, ooh, I got that pit in my stomach, it's like, that's exactly kind of that same kind of connection, right? To kind of what's happening internally, and how to, EMDR is just one way of doing that. But I mean, there's so many ways, right? Through breathing is really helpful, because that's something that helps to calm down the nervous system, bringing it back into that parasympathetic state, not in that like fight or flight, I'm getting attacked by a bear in the woods, that kind of a thing.
EMDR, I heard about it, and that would be a very nice experience to have. I adopt a lot of spiritual practices in order to heal. I know some people, they choose therapy. I have done a lot of therapy too, in different ways, body therapy. I do Reiki sometimes. But I have chosen spiritual knowledge for some reason. So I guess the question is, do you also integrate spirituality to your work, Ashley?
Yeah. And I think, I was talking to somebody the other day, and, talking about what spirituality is can be really kind of tricky,
Right.
because, that's when you can get into the conversations around, religion. It can get into the conversations about, sometimes even just recognizing that connection to self, connection to something, to others, connecting to something much larger than yourself. And for some people that can be really challenging, to be able to identify, what is that, and feeling, when you add in the mental health and the depression and stuff, spirituality can be a big tool in that, for sure. And so when it comes to kind of just doing my own, practices with spirituality, meditation has been a huge thing. Just moments of taking time for that quiet for myself, when I'm recognizing that, maybe there's a lot of things happening around me, and there's a lot of things kind of moving through my body that I'm feeling really activated. So how can I bring myself back to me? And I think that I do that through yoga. I do that through meditation. I do that through running. I'm a big runner. I love running. Hiking with my dogs, my partner, and just kind of nature too. And I think that that's another layer to kind of what spirituality means for me personally, is how do I connect with myself? And I feel like being outside is something that really, really does that for me.
For me, it really helps because the body's still being triggered by certain things. It helps me to kind of see and know that everything is divine. And then remembering that in that moment kind of helps a lot because the heart opens and then everything becomes manageable, per se. The body relaxes too somewhat. to the point of being able to interact, and it's not a problem.
Yeah, with movement. I mean, that's like such a big piece for me in just, like you're saying, that same feeling of like, I'm feeling really closed. I'm feeling like I can't, communicate with others, and I'm feeling all those things. And that's a big, big piece, when we talk about that trauma. Trauma does kind of shut off that part of our brain that makes it really challenging to communicate. So oftentimes, and I connect that to, the chakra system in yoga, where, the throat chakra, you might get this lump in your throat or feeling like really, really tight and restricted in your chest and in the back of the heart. And so, that can be kind of signs right there that, that maybe I'm having a trauma response here, or maybe I'm reacting to something that maybe I don't have conscious awareness of yet.
What inspired you to do what you do today, Ashley?
It's been a journey, let's just say that. So my mom is a therapist. So I guess maybe some influence. I'll give my mom credit there.
Yeah.
Even though maybe my high school self was like, no.
Yeah.
But from there, I kind of was just taking general classes and decided to move out to Hawaii and switched my major after I'm not doing what my mom is doing. And it moved out to Hawaii and decided to pursue marine biology, which very different. And then from there, just kind of realizing, chemistry and math are not my strong suits. Is this really the career choice that I want to do? But I think kind of on that deeper level there, being in Hawaii was kind of just like you're talking about, kind of that spiritual experience that I had out there, and really connecting to myself again, and feeling, going through the challenges of moving away from home for the first time and some of those things, and how scary at times it was, but at the same time knowing that I have myself there too. And so through that and through connecting with other people, that's when I really started picking yoga back up. And yoga was the thing that I always had to go to, kind of in that whole process of just, who am I, right? That question, like you asked in the beginning. And so from that experience, I decided to come back to Colorado and get my degree in social work. And just this feeling of kind of connection that I had when kind of like being with friends and family and kind of talking about these layers. I think I'm a very kind of I've always been a deep thinker and kind of looking at things on kind of a deeper level. And so kind of making meaning and understanding of kind of what is my role and what is kind of the role of everyone else and what are we really here for, And so having kind of that shared meaning and life experiences is really fascinating to me. And I think that that meaningful connection is important.
And I love the way, in a way, what the experience was connecting to yourself and then now connecting to others. And then I wonder if self-regulation has something to do or everything to do with self-trust. Does it, Ashley?
Yeah, I personally believe that absolutely. I think, but first it's having that awareness and developing insight into what is happening to be able to regulate what's happening in the body and being able to regulate all of those things, to be able to feel open and connected. And for me, that's running, it's yoga, it's all those things. And for other people, there's so many different ways and tools and strategies and things that kind of that make people feel more connected to self.
So the process is awareness. It's knowing what's happening first, becoming body aware, and then moving into trusting what we know.
Mm-hmm.
I love that process. I have to say that again. This takes courage, it seems to me, right? To commit to the healing work because it's not easy.
Yeah. And I think and what you said there was with trust, and trust can be really hard when, there was trust that was broken, early on. And especially moving into, creating meaningful connections with others and being in relationship with people and all of that stuff, which can, there's triggers there too. It's becoming triggered by, someone, mirroring back to you those things in you that are really challenging to see at times, but also being able to stay, regulated in those moments when those triggers start to come up. And being able to communicate, like we know with trauma, the part of the brain shuts down that's associated with communication. It can be really challenging to do that. And so just doing that work of practicing how to communicate, asking for what you need, that can be those really healing tools too, because connection is so important for us humans.
Yeah, I love that piece too, the communication part, because it seems like when I try to communicate from a place that's not trauma-informed, that's nothing to do with trauma, it's kind, it's understanding, it's almost like an adult. We have a child and then the adult. It feels like someone's the father, the mother is speaking in me, and it's not the child. And it's so different. There's a very different voice.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and I talk to clients, and I do this work a lot, is kind of exploring what are these pieces that feel really triggering. So pieces in childhood that, created a response of, oh, I feel less than, I feel unworthy, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard. I mean, these narratives that run deep. So being able to recognize those core beliefs that we have about ourselves, but also recognizing the core beliefs that we have about other people, and the way that we see other people. Like maybe, I can't trust others. I can't believe that people are, others are going to be there for me if I need something. Those kind of narratives can run really deep. And so recognizing how that shows up, and those oftentimes come from that inner child, that place that, what does that child need in that moment? Okay, we need to be seen. We need to be heard. We need to be held. Maybe kind of even offering, some guided meditations throughout my sessions with inner child, of let's connect with that inner child. Let's really get to know what that child needs.
As you speak, it's almost speaking to my inner child. It's listening. It is listening, Ashley.
Yeah, and you really do kind of have to step into that role of like, here's my adult self, and it's here, and it's got you, and we're there, and that's the work there too, is recognizing where are these beliefs coming from. Is that inner child who needs something, who's screaming for support and love and understanding, or is it this adult version who can console or be there, or give this inner child a little hug, or bring this inner child to go get some ice cream?
Yeah, right. And you feel safe. I love the way you add meditation to your work, yoga. That is so wonderful. Of course, I have seen other therapists doing that too, but I love your enthusiasm for it too. It comes across like you love helping others. That's beautiful. Thank you for being you, Ashley.
Yes, thank you.
What do you feel is the purpose of the human experience? Why are we here?
Well, I think it all goes back to that connection, in finding kind of, in making meaning out of our experiences, and creating, a life that we can feel excited about, a life that we can feel, proud of. It's establishing that balance of life, and and being able to ultimately, connect to self so that we can connect with others.
And I love when I'm able to notice or experience even the vulnerability in others, in myself and others. It's such a powerful way of perceiving reality. Mm-hmm. It really gets to the core of what this whole experience is all about, as you said, connection and meaningful connections. That's when I look, like sometimes I look at my husband and I see some things that he doesn't know, like, oh my God, I wish he would go deeper into some of these things. And I feel like so much compassion for him. I mean, that's the word I guess I can use. I usually don't use the word compassion that much, but there's a feeling that I can't describe. It's almost like feeling connected to myself enough to kind of experience him being free before he even knows he is.
Yeah.
Something like that. If
Yeah.
I can put words into it.
Yeah, and I feel the exact same way kind of with my partner. And I think that, my partner and I have done a lot of work on just ourselves, but together to be able to come together to recognize, where are these wounds and how do we show up in the world, and how do we impact each other or maybe trigger each other. And on that deeper level, it's how do we relate? Really, it's not just, and I think I've had to learn this more than he has, but it's not just me and my world and kind of just like going along, as this little protective mechanism that steps in, but rather coming together as a team. And it's, when problems come up, it's how can me and you come together with this problem? It's us against the problem, not me versus you.
Yeah.
And so I think that those kinds of things, but also recognizing that there are triggers that our partners will trigger us in, and how do we navigate those triggers to be able to move forward while also having kind of that really deep, like you're saying, that really deep love and really deep compassion for another person.
It's the most amazing experience to have.
Yeah.
Because it is almost like experiencing their reality through your own lens, but it's not just your own, it's everything's connected already. So it's a challenge to put into words, but it's the most amazing experience to know that we're all connected anyway.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Even when there's triggers, even when there's things that are really challenging, there's also this shared humanity there too.
Yes, right. In feeling separate as well. Yes.
Yep. Yeah.
I've seen on your website you offer many kinds of services, therapy, all levels flow with Ashley, that's yoga classes. You offer private group yoga classes, experiential therapy, therapeutic groups, trauma-informed yoga classes, COVID-19 and therapy. Do you also offer services for therapeutic or services for couples that has to do with relationships?
No, no, not so much. I think that it can be really challenging to, kind of merging those two worlds because there's a very specific training that you have to go through to do couples work.
Right.
And I think, if you don't understand kind of the systems or the background under that, there can be a lot of damage that can be done when it comes to doing couples work, not trained as a couples therapist, but I do a lot of, I talk about relationships a lot with clients because that comes up a lot. But it also comes up with just triggers and how these triggers manifest in their relationships.
Right.
And how to manage your own kind of internal state.
When talking about relationships, it goes back to the individual anyway. Like we need to do our own work separately in order to come together in this healing journey. It makes a lot of sense to me. I was curious about the experiential therapy. Talk to me for a moment about that, Ashley.
Yeah. So I haven't done a whole lot of experiential therapy recently. But I was in my internship, I was working at a community mental health center, working with women who've experienced interpersonal violence. And so a lot of the stuff that we were doing in there is like finding activities, kind of little games. So it was a big group that we had. And it's just women kind of sharing experiences and connecting on, maybe these shared experiences with violence and things like that. But also being able to take these games into, how do we show up in these games and in these experiences that we do. So that might be, when I was in grad school, we went to a ropes course and we did, how to conquer fears and how to kind of move through challenges, or when things feel unstable, if you're on a hike and you're stepping on rocks that are unstable, how to take that into that debrief process afterwards of what was that experience like for you? When we did that game, about, I'm trying to think about, very specific games that we've done, but kind of using games, activities, experiences as a way to really feel what that experience feels like. So yeah, like, how do I trust other people? If I close my eyes and someone tells me to go, walk 5 steps to the right, what is my inner narrative that's happening? And chances are, that can be related to, if you feel this hesitation, it's like, ooh, there's trust stuff there, that it's really hard for me to trust people. Really hard for me, when my partner was saying, take 5 steps to the right, for me to actually do that, because I was like, oh, but I want to do 5 steps to the left, or I want to keep my eyes open during this exercise. And so it's just all about noticing how experiences show up, because kind of in that same sense of, the way that we show up one way is kind of how we show up in many ways throughout our lives.
Yeah, I have a question about, when it comes to your services, also about the trauma-informed yoga classes. Do you offer them in person, online?
So right now, I'm working at a yoga studio. It's right kind of in my office area. But so it's Rishi's yoga studio. And so I teach classes, like 7:30 in the morning on Thursdays. But I apply elements of trauma-informed yoga. I'm not having any current trauma-informed yoga classes right now, but hoping to get some workshops and stuff set up here in the future, maybe in the next few months or something like that.
Let's talk for a moment about we probably have already been talking about all these, the triggers and the vagus nerves. It just that sounds very scientific. Most people don't know what that is. So what is the vagus nerve and what is its function?
Yeah, so the vagus nerve there's 2 parts of it. And it's kind of associated with the autonomic nervous system, the part of our nervous system that is associated with that fight or flight response. And that's that dorsal, the part of the dorsal vagus nerve. And that's the nerve that runs kind of throughout the face. It runs through the throat and then the neck and down into the heart, the organs, the lungs, the stomach, straight down there, So when you become activated, or when there's something that is a perceived threat, let's say, okay, a bear in the woods, okay, that's like a real threat, but if there's a perceived threat, that your nervous system is associated with a specific trauma, that part of the nervous system can get activated, which is why you experience your heart racing. That's why you experience shallow breathing. That's why you get that kind of butterflies in your tummy. When you, kind of face flushing, that kind of stuff, because the vagus nerve is all associated with that fight or flight response. Yeah, and it's really interesting when you kind of start, and that's about kind of recognizing what am I noticing in my body, and that's where I do a lot of work with clients on identifying. Okay, if I'm noticing my heart racing really fast, let's notice what that looks like. Let's notice maybe the shapes or the size of it, or maybe the textures of that, and seeing if is this shape changing in some way, or is it staying stagnant?
The blog post you sent me that outlined 10 ways to improve the vagal tone. Is that the same thing, Ashley, the vagal tone?
So there's something called heart rate variability, and that's kind of just the heart, like heartbeats, like how much space is between each heartbeat. And so by strengthening the vagal tone is ultimately, there's tools and strategies that you can use, such as, in yoga, there's chanting that is going to be stimulating and activating that vagus nerve that runs through the throat, singing, trying to think of some other ones, kind of just some of those self-regulation strategies, breathing, those things are going to help create more space between each heart rate. So creating more strength in this heart rate variability. And so, so by doing that and strengthening that, you're kind of helping train the nervous system to, when activated, self-regulate and slow things down. Also known as resilience.
I love them all these practices, these ways to improve the vagal tone, if I can pronounce correctly. So gargling is one of them too. I was surprised at that.
Yeah. And again, it's running through kind of the throat area, so it's going to be stimulating that nerve there. Yeah.
So with the yoga, you actually get a lot of that covered, a lot of those ways to improve it. So singing, the chanting, and then also the breath work. Yeah, I love that.
Breath work.
And then laughter. That's another one.
Yeah, and that's also just that connectivity piece, be feeling connected to other people.
Yeah.
Which is going to downregulate the nervous system and bring you back into that parasympathetic state rather than activated sympathetic.
I love them all. I'm going to try the gargling. I'll try that one. Because laughter, my husband's very good at it. I think we're covered with the yoga. I'm covered. Play, right. Fish oils, another one that I saw here on the list. Fasting. Cold showers. This is a tough one. I don't think I would engage in cold showers, but I heard that's very, very good for you. And why is that, Ashley?
Yeah, so it's the same concept. So when you practice yoga, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. So have you ever had that experience when you're, maybe in Warrior 2 for super long, or you're in chair pose or something that's really, really challenging, even pigeon pose. And you're kind of getting that sensation of, oh my gosh, I want to get out of this pose. This is so hard. So, and then getting guided through, how do I breathe right now through this place that is really challenging? And ultimately, it's the same concept as the cold showers. So when there is, something that's really challenging, how do I allow myself and train myself, my vagus nerve, to be able to downregulate when things feel distressing, stressful? But again, it goes back to that self-awareness piece of, what are my tendencies when I'm activated? Do I shut down? Do I just say, screw it, I'm getting out of this pose, I'm not doing this?
Yes.
Is it, and that's how, when we're talking about that heart rate variability, those are one ways to increase that, again, resilience. How do I train myself to sit with the discomfort even when it's hard?
Sometimes we get too intellectual, don't we? And we just try to understand everything, and then we say, yeah, I understand, I get it. But it takes practice to really understand, whatever it is. The other blog post that you sent me, that has to do with the conversation we have been having too about triggers and emotions. The title is Let Your Triggers Be Your Teacher. That says it all. Almost like it's a beautiful statement about emotions, triggers being our guide to wisdom and to health and well-being. Some passages caught my attention where it says, emotions change the chemistry of both the brain and the body. And then also this one here, the section says, it's not that triggers are bad. They actually give us an opportunity to observe and reflect, which enables us to heal. It's simple, but so difficult at the same time. That's paraphrasing what I read in that article. And then another piece that caught my attention says, our reaction is literally below our awareness. Our reaction is literally below our awareness. That caught my attention, which I would love to hear from you, your understanding of that.
So our reaction is below our awareness. I'm trying to think of what section that was under. So Yeah. So sometimes there can be kind of those automatic responses that happen in the nervous system, so bringing it back to, triggers. So, I might be frustrated with my partner and just say something out of, very reactionary place, right? And that oftentimes comes from that place of trauma right away. And so it's hard, to be in that moment and regulate when it's not in our conscious awareness yet. And we have to do the tools and strategies to work through managing our reactions, but also being aware of them in the first place.
So reactions, a lot of times they come first and then we become aware of them.
And trauma really heightens those reactions, and trauma really makes it harder to slow down from the place of feeling to reaction. And so that's where kind of this practice and the work of recognizing, noticing, seeing what's happening in the body and how that translates to action and behavior.
Almost sounds like if we all do this work, this reality would look so much different. It's almost like we all become therapists or enlightened or monks. We're all like, right? If we did the work.
And it can be really hard, doing this work is not easy. It is not easy at all. And especially when you add in layers of mental health too, like depression, when there's those layers of, motivation to do things, it can be really hard, sometimes for people just to get up in the morning. It can be really hard just to, practice taking care of yourself or showering or, those things on kind of that level with kind of those chemical imbalances there with depression. So it can be really, really hard when you add in those layers.
That is so true. Yeah, I interviewed somebody recently and he said, I think he's writing a book now about that's titled Medication or Meditation. That's like a question. When it's time to medicate and not to meditate, or both.
Yeah, it's a key.
We need it all, right? In a way, we need all the help we can get in a way.
Yeah.
In that article, there's also an outline on the steps to identify and learn from our triggers. And then there are 3 steps. Set an intention to see them first, and then get a journal or a notebook, and then find the why. Would you like to add to that, Ashley, to those ideas?
Yeah, I think journaling can be a really powerful tool. I journal. I think it was about a year ago. I was journaling every single day. It was just this kind of little challenge with myself. But I was journaling every day, and I practiced a lot of that, like stream of consciousness journaling. I don't know. Are you familiar with that?
I am. Yes.
Yeah. So I was really just, practicing some of that. But I think journaling can be really helpful to just being able to recognizing patterns that are happening over time, recognizing patterns with self, recognizing how you're feeling, but, also seeing, where are there places that maybe I'm missing. Because, again, trauma can really kind of change the way that we see the world. It can kind of put this kind of black and white or kind of gray scale between you and everything else, or you and the world. Maybe one, perception can get a little bit off. And so journaling can really help building some more perception around kind of what is fact and what is kind of just maybe an emotional reaction.
And I wonder who really sees reality as it is, because we all have been influenced by trauma. Like you say, I think it's small with the capital T or the little t, but all of us have been through some sort of trauma. So our lens are not as clear as it could have been or could be.
Yeah, and it is that perception. And it's all based on, way we grew up, what did we learn from our parents? What did we see modeled for us? How did we interact with our world, and how did the world interact with us? And that can be in those little T traumas, which are those that are, those small little things that really have a big impact, or, those big T traumas, talking about natural disasters, abuse, sexual assault, car accidents. I mean, those are the big ones, but which can really kind of create those heavy kind of perceptions there.
Right. It can really blind us in so many
Yeah.
ways. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're almost at the end. I do have a few more questions for you, the ending questions. But before that, I would like to mention some of the books that you sent to me as inspiration for this conversation too, which has everything to do with what you've been saying. And those books were The Body Keeps the Score by Van der Kork, and then How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LePera. So would you like to add anything about these amazing books? Because I know the work behind the scenes here and how incredibly helpful they are too.
Yeah, I think those are some really big books that have kind of helped me with my framework around how I see things, and especially The Body Keeps the Score. Talking about yoga, talking about trauma, talking about how oftentimes it can be, these experiences can kind of become lodged within the body based on, our stress responses, and how that's being sent to the muscles and the way that we show up there. And then I think just doing, the do your work or do the work. That is a book that I just recently picked up, and I just started following her. She's Dr. Nicole, I think it's LePera is pronounced, but she's on Instagram. And she has a lot of really, really fun videos that kind of talk a lot about what we've been talking about today, and how triggers can happen and our responses and all of these things kind of in real time, how to communicate things when things feel hard. And so I really appreciate her work. And there's some journaling prompts and things that you can go on to that book and kind of practice. So applying that to the journal exercise before.
I'll probably have those links, if you wish to, attached to your podcast profile. That might be a good idea, because it is a suggestion, right, Ashley?
Mm-hmm.
So my ending questions, I'll ask you 2 questions to end the conversation today. What do you love most about being in a human body, or being the human body?
I think our ability to experience the world. And through like the senses, really being able to embrace the things, the little things, right, and helps me gain an appreciation for the things that I do have and to be grateful for. And some of those things where maybe some people kind of don't have certain senses of taste, smell, made me able to move the body, those places like that too.
And my last question is, what 3 experiences you wish everyone to have before they lose the body, before they die?
That's a good question. I would say the ability to feel kind of emotional experiences, the ability to sit with those emotional experiences, and really gain an understanding from there. And then using the body as a tool, whether that be yoga or movement, running, any of those things, hiking, even breathing. Breathing is there too. Using breath work as a tool to practice.
That's 3 in 1, right, Ashley, in a way? I mean, that's so much to unpack. What else can we say? Thank you so much again for your presence here today, for this beautiful enthusiasm that you show toward helping others and doing the work, the healing work yourself. It's truly beautiful and precious. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
And before we say goodbye, where can we find more information about you, your services, products, and future projects?
So my website, which is www.integrated-experiences.com. And then on Instagram, it's integrated.experiences.
I'll have those links on your podcast profile too. Thank you so much again, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Ashley Fredericks and her work, please visit integrated-experiences.com and Instagram at integrated.experiences.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.